a gun in the face.
Then all of a sudden, they all kind of lined up. They pointed their guns at me. And this is the point where I thought, I'm going to die today.
Started 2 years of horror for an American in Venezuela.
They said, you need to give us your phone and get ready because you're coming with us.
I'm Becky Bruce, and I spent a year researching and piecing together Josh and Tammy Holt's story about their ordeal in a notorious prison.
That's when everything started to turn bad. We had another pound on the door. Boom, boom, boom. And there was the police once again.
You can binge all of the episodes of Hope in Darkness on kslpodcasts.com or wherever you get your podcasts.
Hey, welcome to Project Recovery, a podcast about addiction. More importantly, it's about recovery. And it's brought to you by useonlyasdirected.org. They've got a 3-part solution for the opioid crisis. It's speak out, opt out, and throw out. And if it wasn't for their help, we wouldn't be here weekly giving you this podcast. Dr. Matt, how are you?
I'm doing well.
Hey, so we're switching it up today. We're going to do a little something different. It's just going to be me and you.
Right.
We're going to kind of focus on some good news and ways to help you through COVID-19 and the corona crisis that we're currently in. But before we get to that, I'm 46 years old.
Yep.
I had my first like dad moment just yesterday.
Your first dad moment?
Well, let me explain it to you.
Okay, I think that needs some explanation.
And it seems kind of weird. So
because you've known you've had kids before this.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. No, then this wasn't with my kids. My kids were in the car. But so here's the story. So I'm going to pick up my kids at my ex-wife's house, and I'm waiting outside. And I'm honking because Bowden usually comes out and he's got all his stuffed animals. Frankie's a little behind her, and then I'm waiting for 5 minutes for Presley. I don't know what she's doing.
Sounds about right.
Yeah, I don't know what she's doing. So I just, just kind of simmer.
Right.
And so then they finally all go get in the car. And as we're driving by, I see these 4 kids, long hair kind of like ours, just riding their bikes around in a circle.
Ruffians,
that's right.
Ne'er-do-wells.
And so as I drive by him, this one dude looks at me and mouths, F you.
How old are they?
He was probably 15. And so I go like this, and it was like, and I read it, and I was like, was that for me? Had to be me. I'm the only guy. Like, no, it had to be me. Yeah. So I stopped the car, and Presley's like, Dad, what are you doing? And I go, that dude just mouthed F you to me. And my daughter Frankie goes, do you know him? And I go, no. And so I unroll the window, and I look back at him, and I go, hey. And he goes, what? And I go, you want to say that to my face? And he's like, what? And I go, you know I can read lips, right? And he goes, sorry. And I said, okay. And I just rolled up the window and drove off.
Yeah.
And my daughter was like, hey, Dad, I go to school with those guys. What happened? I go, and so we kind of talked about it. And then they go, well, what were you going to do? And I go, nothing. I just wanted him to know that I read his lips. And I was that kid 15, 40 years ago, doing the same thing, and some guy stopped and did the same thing to me, but actually he came over and beat me up. But I was like, I did. I was actually flipping him off.
You grew up in Ogden, so yeah.
And so, but I was like, man, that was weird. I didn't like that because I was like, oh.
I was, that's a good story. I was hoping he'd have been a little bit more ready to throw down with you.
And I was like, what am I going to do? Go have him call his mom?
You going to beat up a 15-year-old?
Yeah, no,
right?
I'm not going to do that. I've had a bad 2 years. I don't need that kind of publicity. It's like,
kids are so dumb, man. Like, being 15 is just, in some ways, the best and in some ways the worst. They got testosterone. They don't know what to do with. They're trying to be tough and cool, but yeah, I mean, 99% of the time, that kid is always going to back down like that.
And he just got razzed by his buddies after that. You thought you were cool, but that guy
so
stopped
tough.
and called you out on it, and you stared at your shoes and went, sorry.
He took a lot of crap that day, I bet.
But, it was just one of those moments that's like, wow.
And it probably embarrassed your daughters, right?
Yeah. I go, do you know him? He goes to my school. I don't know him, but yeah.
Yeah.
And, she's sulking in the back. And
he's on his BMX bike.
And I'm talking to my son, and they go, why would he do that? And I go, well, he was just trying to be tough around his friends.
Yeah.
He doesn't know me. He just thought he'd be cool.
Right.
He wasn't cool.
No. Well done, Dad.
Yeah. You have him on the podcast.
Yeah, find out who he is. Let's have him on the show.
Anything cool happening to you?
Oh, I wish. I've been working from home primarily. My son was teasing me yesterday. I did go into my private office to see one person last night, and he's like, "When's the last time you left the house?" I had to think about it, like Saturday, I think.
When's the last time you put pants on?
Saturday.
Yeah, right?
The last time I left the house. Yeah. No, it's been really chill, really nice. We built a garden box, and yesterday I was kind of looking out my bedroom window down on the garden box, and we had this little family of quail come out, and I was worried that I was going to have to get after the quail, but they stayed away from the garden box, but, ran around the backyard, and it's just kind of nice to be home. I don't know if I can go back to work full time. I'm working actually more hours than I think I did before, but it's all from home, and so.
And I think the interesting point to talk about is, during this whole COVID-19 Corona time, there's been some really cool things happen. And, I really like to celebrate the positivity that comes along with this pandemic. And,
last night.
Last night, yeah.
Yeah, I was riding my skateboard up and down the halls in my office. There's nobody there.
Really?
It was great.
Listening to a little Pretty in Pink.
There you go.
Little John Hughes soundtrack.
Yeah. No, but you're right. There are a lot of good things that are not to dismiss. I mean, I don't know if we even need to say it, but obviously there's some people that financially especially and physically are really, hurt during this time. It's a difficult time. But there's so many positive opportunities, whether people are taking them or not. I don't know. What do you think? I mean, other than, calling out 15-year-olds, have you been taking any other opportunities coming your way?
I think I've gotten a lot closer with my kids over this time. I think I've gained a better appreciation for teachers and what they do. I think that's amazing. Sure. But I when I look at the world as a whole, because I think the whole world is going through this right now, and there's been some glorious things happen. And I think it's like the earth just said, hey, look, time out. Let's all take a breather. And you're able to see, structures over in Europe, in China, that you've never been able to see because of the smog and the pollution and everything that's going on. And I think those are the silver linings that I like to focus my attention on. I saw this thing. There's John Krasinski. Have you seen what he's doing?
Is it like he's doing like good news or
some
something?
Good news?
Some good news. I haven't watched it though. Tell me about it.
He does some pretty cool stuff, and he just celebrates the good things that are happening in the world right now. Like there's this one girl who was really bummed. She was 9 years old. She was supposed to take a class trip to go see Hamilton, and she wasn't able to go. And when he found out that she was bummed, he's talking to her, and next thing you know, Lin-Manuel is on there, and the whole cast of Hamilton is singing to her.
What? Oh,
yeah,
cool.
And so I mean, it was just a cool thing like that.
Yeah.
I saw this one guy, I guess this older gentleman. He was celebrating his 50th anniversary, and his wife was on the second floor in a quarantine room, and he couldn't see her. And they found out that he wasn't able to see her. The fire department came and got one of those cherry picker ladders, put him in there, took him up 2 stories and look in the window,
nice.
And he's dressed in his suit, and he sings to her. I mean, I'm getting chills talking about it.
Did he put the boombox over his head?
No, I don't think he knew that. Wouldn't say anything?
Yeah.
Yeah. But, I mean, there's way cool stories like that happening all across the world right now. And I think, there were so many times that people would say, we can't work from home. But I think a lot of people are working from home and finding out they're
I didn't think I could work from home as much as I do.
And you're finding out they're a lot more productive.
Yeah. Oh, there's the ability to be productive and be grounded at home with your family in ways that you didn't think you could.
And I, not to take it back to recovery, but I want to because this is a podcast about recovery. But that's what you do in recovery. You're in your addiction. You think that you can't do anything different until you're forced to. And then you adapt. And then you go, wow, I can do this. And I think that's what the world's doing is they go, I just can't get out of this. I can't do this any different. I know this is all I know. And then something forces you to change. And then you go, oh, I can do this.
Right.
And not only can I can excel at doing it this way. And I can see the positive things that are happening because of this. And so I think that's in recovery. That's what we kind of do is that we get in such a negative space, in such a cycle that we think there's no way out of it. And then all of a sudden somebody shows us there is a way out. And then you go, I can do this. So I think it's an amazing time right now, and I think we'll be talking about this for generations.
Oh, for sure. I think it's such a unique. It's unique even in the sense that when does the whole world ever really share anything? Unfortunately, it's usually something kind of negative like a world war. But in our generation, and even in most of our parents' generation, the whole world hasn't really shared much. And I think we can make this not such a negative. Optimism versus pessimism. So, an optimistic person kind of sees the opportunities. A pessimistic person just kind of sees the problems, right? I used to have a professor in grad school that said, an overly optimistic person might have rose-colored glasses on. They see the world is all rosy and everything. But a pessimistic person has manure-colored glasses because everything looks crappy.
Yeah.
Right? And you have to decide, there are stresses, inconveniences. You and I got parking tickets last week, even though we were the only two cars in the parking lot.
I called on that.
Literally.
I called on
that.
They said, yeah, you got to pay.
Yeah, that's why I didn't call. But I've never had anybody say you don't have to pay, so I just quit calling. But it depends on the lens you see the world with. Do you want to see it with that optimistic lens? If you do, you are definitely going to see opportunities right now. I had a couple thoughts,
Wait, before you go to the thoughts, I got the way to bring it back to my recovery. Once again,
it's all about you. Okay.
No, it's not all about me. But listen, because this is a good analogy for what you're saying, the glass thing. This is how they taught us in recovery. A dad was talking to a son, and the dad tells the son, there's two wolves inside of you. There's a black wolf and there's a white wolf. And they go back and forth, and the black wolf is negative, and the white wolf is positive.
Right.
And the son asks the dad, he goes, hey, Dad, which wolf's going to get bigger? And the dad goes, which one you feed?
Yeah. And I think that's is that a Native American
probably
saying or story?
And so in my life, I choose to feed the white wolf because
and I think you've always been that way. I mean, I think some of us hit this world either more on the negative or positive side, optimistic or pessimistic. Most of us are in the middle. We have a mix of both. And I've always thought,
is that 50 Shades of Grey?
No, I think that's something else.
Oh, okay.
But I think you've always been. You probably, since you were a little kid, have been on that optimistic side.
Is that a mindset?
It becomes a mindset. I think there's some good evidence to suggest that it may also be a sort of an inherited trait. But the vast majority of people, 80+% of people, are in the middle, where we have a mix of both, and it really is which one we feed and which kind of lenses you put in your glasses, so to speak. Because there's a downside to everything. You can have a crappy worldview and see everything through manure-colored glasses all the time if you want, because there's plenty of negative out there. People are making less money. People have lost their jobs. People, there are a lot of things going on. Lost loved ones, of course. And a lot of people are stressed, living under the perception of what's going to happen if I get it, if my kids get it, especially if you're a parent with a child who has a special need like, just asthma or diabetes or one of these things that might make them at higher risk, an autoimmune deficiency, anything like that. And if that's your focus every day, thoughts lead to feelings, lead to behaviors, there's no way to have those sorts of thoughts primarily without feeling stressed, negative, depressed, anxious, and then our behaviors become unproductive, right? And it's the optimistic person who says, a realistic optimist is somebody who says, I know those negatives are there. They're not Pollyannish about it. They don't pretend that they're not there. They're like, I know they're there, but the positives are just as real. And so somebody who is, I know people who are taking pay cuts right now. They're lucky enough to still be working, but they're taking pay cuts. Well, what are they going to focus on? The fact that, hey, at least I still have this job and it's likely to turn around in a few months and I'll be back to my previous wage? Or do they want to focus on the 10% that they're losing in their paycheck every week? One of those is going to make you feel a little more energized and optimistic and productive, and the other is going to kill that. Does that make sense?
No, totally. Are you a Debbie Downer?
Yeah. And so I love the stories of people that are pushing themselves. Sometimes it is a choice. Sometimes you have to force yourself to ditch those manure-colored glasses and see the world in a more optimistic way. But the that doesn't mean that the positives are less real than the negatives.
Gas is cheaper.
Yeah, and you know what? I'm not even filling up on gas as much anymore because I'm not going anywhere.
I'm getting 1 week to the gallon.
Yeah, exactly. And it's really great. I mean, when's the last time, like, you didn't have to fill up a couple times a week and spend several $100s a month on gas? So, I mean, that's fantastic.
So there's all kinds of cool stuff going on right now. You're listening to Project Recovery. It's a podcast about addiction, more importantly about recovery. Coming up, things you didn't know about rehab.
Two friends taking pictures of the rising full moon on a summer night.
Two teenage kids doing what teenage kids do.
When a stranger with a gun and a death wish changed everything.
It was violent, it was senseless, and I will never understand it, I will never accept it.
I'm Amy Donaldson, and unfortunately, we're all too familiar with stories about how violence shatters lives. But what we rarely see is how they are rebuilt. In a new podcast, The Letter, we relive tragedy, but only so we can hear the rest of the story. The struggle to reclaim lives, the realities of grief, and the possibilities of forgiveness.
I believe in miracles. Sometimes I thought, there are no miracles. Yeah, there are, and this is a big one.
Follow The Letter at theletterpodcast.com or wherever you get your podcasts.
All right, Dr. Matt, before we get into things you didn't know about rehab, you said you had some things you wanted to talk about.
Well, just a couple stories real quick. I mean, I talk to people every day, all day. That's pretty much what I do. Mm-hmm. And there were a couple things I've heard recently that really jumped out to me, and I'll change the details a little bit. So if you think you know who I'm talking about, you don't. But
got it.
But they're both are about dads. And one dad, in the first story, the one that really has a lot to do with recovery, he has been for a lot of years actually a work-at-home guy, one of those computer guys that's, able to work at home. He has...
We're not sure what Dad does, but he's on the computer a lot.
Exactly. And, his wife also has a full-time profession, and so she'd be gone all day, and the kids are gone all day, and so he's home. Well, he's developed a drinking problem over the years where he, can kind of, moderate his drinking all day long, and he's kind of in this phase of inebriation all day.
The 4-beer buzz.
There you go.
That's what I used to say golfing. If I could keep a 4-beer buzz, I was deadly.
You were deadly.
I never kept it at the 4-beer buzz, but that was the goal.
That was the goal, yeah. And so this guy, now he's got his wife home and his kids home all day because she has had to, like many of us, learn to work from home, and the kids are at home supposedly doing school and all that stuff. And he realized he wasn't going to be able to get away because they didn't know. Mm-hmm. Like they knew he drank once in a while, but they didn't know he was hiding it.
And when you're in an active addiction, routine is as much of the addiction as anything.
Yeah.
And so being able to do that, and all of a sudden you can't, it throws you for a loop, and then then people start to see how bad it really is, and maybe even for yourself you see how bad it is.
Well, to his credit, he jumped in pretty early in this process, and he just came clean with his wife, and he showed her where he hid the booze and how much he'd been drinking. And to her credit, she didn't overreact, but she didn't blow it off as no big deal. And they partnered up on the issue and got rid of the booze. And he, I think he switched over to drinking, was it LaCroix? Mm-hmm. Probably 10 of those a day now.
Bubbly water,
nothing. It's not going to do anything but keep your oral fixation under control.
And that's a big part of it. I mean, I was a pack-a-day smoker for 20 years.
Yep.
And I quit when my daughter was 4. She's now 15, so that's 11 years. I've done the math. And for the first 2 years after I quit smoking, I would still get in the car and unroll the window like I was going to light a cigarette for 2 years afterwards. Automatic. Yep. And after a meal, I would, I don't smoke anymore, but I would reach for the pack of cigarettes.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, that routine is very
huge.
Yeah.
And that's what causes relapses, or contributes at least. Anyway, the two of them are doing great. He said he feels healthier and happier. It's been a month since he's had a drink, and I think it just emphasizes what we've seen on the show a lot, that if you are a partner, if you have a spouse or significant other, work together, not against each other on these kinds of things. And he is so just relieved. He was telling me that he's kind of free of that for the time being, and he's planning to do some meetings and things like that are a little more formal. But he never really had the reason to get to have to give it up
because he had a decision to make. And I can tell you, without even knowing this guy, he played the conversation over in his head 100 times before he told his wife where he hid the liquor and what he'd been doing.
Sure.
Because he was playing the what-if game, which is very dangerous to play in recovery land. You can't say, what if? What if I say this and she leaves? And then you try to predict what someone else is going to do. And you can't do that. And that's what I guarantee he had this conversation.
Right.
I'm going to tell her, she's going to leave, she's going to throw it, she's going to say, I knew it, you lied to me, and my whole world's going to change. So in active addiction, you think to yourself, you try to play it out. That's what kept me trying to beat it, because I didn't want to have that conversation because I didn't know how other people were going to react. So I wanted to figure out if I could do it, but I couldn't. So I had to come clean. I was forced to come clean.
And I think a lot of people are forced to come clean by hitting what we call the rock bottom, right?
Exactly.
In this case, the COVID quarantine created a situation where he could have tried to continue to get away with it.
Mm-hmm.
But to his credit, he kind of didn't want to. And to
I
her
applaud
credit,
him.
Oh yeah, absolutely, a lot of courage to do that. And I think a lot of recognition goes out to her for being a good listener and emphasizing that they could do it together and not, playing out that worst case scenario that he'd probably had in his head.
You don't know what it does to me when we have the stories week after week come in here and talk about couples. I mean, we've had couples where they put their exes or their spouses in jail for 4 months.
Right.
And they're still together.
Yep.
We've had people have them change jobs and move all around the country for their addiction and still stay together. I love it when true love wins. It makes me so happy.
I think those are some of my favorite stories too.
Yeah. I mean, if
Maybe
you can put
because we're
someone
both
in jail for
divorced.
4 months and they still love you,
Right?
that's true love.
I know. Man, we should open a marriage therapy. Nah,
From
no.
two divorced guys?
Yeah.
That should be the name of it. Two divorced guys,
Two divorced
marriage
guys.
therapy.
Yeah, it's pretty good. The other one, real quick, is kind of the opposite. It's a dad who has been a workaholic, traveling a lot for his job. So not just working a lot, but out of town multiple days a week. So he'd be out of town anywhere from the whole week to 2 to 3 days. And so this is a dad who, as his kids have gotten a little bit older, he felt just disconnected from, wasn't able to feel like he knew how to connect with them when he'd come home. Legitimately, he was pretty tired and had other work to do. And he had expressed to me the sadness over, and I'll just be honest, not one of those guys that's really natural at connecting, probably with other people. But feeling that loss, just like his kids are getting older. His oldest is in junior high now, and he came and talked to me the other day and just said, "Listen, this is the best thing that's ever happened." And I said, "Well, I thought you just about have cut your income in half." He's like, "Oh yeah, that part's not good."
Yeah.
He's like, "We're burning through savings," and because he's a salesperson and he's not making the sales he's used to making. And he's like, "But you know what? The best thing is, I went for a walk with, and I'll probably get choked up because my daughter's this age too. I went for a walk the other day with my daughter, and she held my hand and said, 'Thanks for taking me for a walk, Dad.'" And this is his junior high daughter, and the two of them talked about her friends, and he said, "I didn't know how to talk to her about it, so I just listened." And he said, "I've never felt so connected to her in my whole life, in all of her 13 years. And I just thought, man, that is right there. That's worth losing the income. That's worth making a major life change. That's something that will last for him and for her forever." And he said, "That's now what we do. We take a walk, just the two of us, every day and talk."
That's amazing, because that's exactly what I'm talking about. When the world gives you lemons, make lemonade. And he has now got this connection with his daughter that if you would have went to him and said, "Hey, it's going to cost you $75,000, but you're going to connect with your daughter, would you do it?"
Yeah.
He'd probably go, "Ooh, $75,000."
Yeah.
But now, knowing what he knows and having what he has, he'd go, "In a second."
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
In a second. Because we all know where we can get more money. You just have to go out there and work for it.
Yeah. Money is what we end up, money is our security.
Yeah.
And so I don't like it when people downplay the importance of money, because money really is security. If it were 200 years ago, maybe the number of pigs and chickens and cows you had were your security. Now it really is dollars in the bank. So it's very important.
Yes.
However, when you've had an experience like this guy's had, you realize it's where it is on the hierarchy of importance, and it's definitely not above just a beautiful relationship with your kids.
That's why I love this podcast so much, is because time after time we have people in recovery come in who have come from money, and some that haven't, but have lost everything.
Yeah.
And then they find out what's truly important to them.
Yeah.
You know, and that's such a beautiful thing to see. And I've said it over and over again. Whenever I get in front of a task that I don't want to do, or something that's going to be painful, I always remind myself what I've gone through. Mm-hmm. And I go, okay.
And you've had to face some of those conversations with your kids over the last couple of years, earlier on in your recovery. And, I know how when you talk about things, you're kind of excited about everything you talk about, regardless of how mundane it is, and even if Josh and I aren't listening.
Yeah.
But the energy and the importance you've put into talking about those relationships with your kids, and that's a whole nother level. And I think the listeners have heard that. And anybody who is listening to this podcast right now, take the opportunity, see the opportunity, make the opportunity right now. You have more time on your hands than you've had before. Connect with your kids somehow.
And, not only your kids, your old friends, this is a perfect time to reach out. You have an excuse to call them to say, hey, you know what? I just was thinking about you, man.
Right.
I'm just checking in on you. And you don't know how far that goes for somebody. If they're sitting in isolation, if they're sitting alone, and to hear an old voice from an old friend call them up and go, hey, you just popped into my head. I've made probably a dozen of those phone calls.
It's really fun, huh?
Driving down, listening to a tune, go, hey, man, that reminds me of Sozio. I'm going to call Soz. And so I call Soz, go, hey, bud, what's going on, man?
Right, yep.
And that's what the silver linings that can really come from the pandemic that's going on right now. You're listening to Project Recovery. I told you we were going to get to the things you didn't know about rehab, and we promise you we will right after this.
The contents of this program are for informational purposes only. The program is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician, licensed therapist, or other qualified health provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you've heard on this program. KSL does not recommend or endorse any specific tests, physicians, products, procedures, opinions, or other information that may be mentioned on the program. Reliance on any information provided on the program is solely at your own risk.